You're listening to The Five. I'm your host, Ross Wallace Chafe. The Five is a podcast about music where on each episode, my guest selects 5 pieces that are in whatever way influencing their musical practice. We listen to each one and discuss why and how they stand out. My guest for episode 6 is Estonian experimental musician and producer Maria Minerva. She won the Estonian Music Awards for Best Female Artist and Best Electronic Album in 2015, and in 2017 was named one of the top 12 most outstanding Estonian women in the world. Her music explores the interaction of experimental dance, lo-fi bedroom recordings, and theoretical sound art in a way that has made all the many records in her discography unique. Her most recent solo release, Bless, came out on 100% Silk in 2013. And today at my house is Maria Minerva, Estonian producer, citizen, but current Los Angeles resident, environmental activist, great musician. Thank you for coming here.
Thank you for having me. Should I look at you or the microphone?
Oh, you pick. You pick.
Why would I look at the microphone? At least now I found out how to pronounce your last name. So.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Awesome.
Minerva is a word that looks daunting, but I don't think there would ever be any other way
That's
to
actually my
pronounce it.
artist name.
Right.
Yeah.
But so your real first name is Maria.
It's Maria. Yeah.
Uh-huh. So why and when did you pick Minerva?
I guess when I started making music,
Mm-hmm.
and I was really into Greek and Roman mythology when I was a teenager.
Cool.
And then the story with Minerva is that she's basically the goddess. Like in Greece, she was known as Athena,
Mm-hmm.
but in the Roman culture, it's Minerva, and so she was the goddess of arts and war, which I found interesting. And also because I have like huge daddy issues, I thought it was a good choice because Minerva or Athena was born out of like Jupiter's or Zeus's head instead of being birthed by a woman.
Oh,
so
really?
It's kind of like I'm very influenced by my father, so
Sure.
it's like it makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
It's very audible or like psychoanalytic explanation.
So there's a lot more to it than just it sounded cool.
Mm. There really is, yeah.
Your father is a talk show host in Estonia?
Yeah, amongst other things,
Mm-hmm.
like when I was growing up, he was a radio and newspaper journalist, but then he also was into music, and he still DJs and MCs and hosts, and he does like all kinds of weird stuff. For example, this year in Estonia we have like a big 80s like throwback bash with like
cool.
Sabrina and all these like European trashy 80s
Cool.
artists, so he's like hosting it.
Oh, wow. Wow.
He does a lot of weird stuff, but he also writes and he's also on TV. So
Cool.
interesting person.
We talked a little bit last time we saw each other about Estonian music. I'm a huge fan of the Marin and Uku Kut, if I'm pronouncing those.
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. Did you start making music while you were still living there?
In Estonia, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess you could say that, but it was interesting. Okay. So Estonia is a place where kind of everyone knows you from around town, and sometimes I felt that it was very hard to reinvent yourself.
Sure.
And so I was more in the art scene and trying to be an arts writer or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I started producing music, it was like very daunting to come out with music instead.
Right.
And so I sort of fully did that actually when I moved to London.
Mm-hmm.
And then
And that was when
it was
you were
easier
how
to
old?
do it further away. It was actually not that long ago. I mean, maybe now it is, but I was 21.
Okay.
So it was like, usually people start making music when they're like teenagers.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So I was already in my 20s.
Right.
Yeah.
At that time, it was a lot of house music and like the club music stuff. Like Fabric was a big thing. Was that sort of the scene that you started making
In the
music in
UK?
and performing in?
Yeah, there was, I went to Berlin a few times, but that wasn't like my city.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to go to London, which is where I did my master's. And so definitely got sucked into the music scene over there.
Right.
And even not the big clubs, but more like the little Tuesday raves at Plastic People, which was a thing back then.
Okay.
Like a really famous UK-based club,
Right.
but really small too.
Right.
Really sweaty and really dark and like really good music. And then I did a brief internship at the Wire magazine, which is like an academic music magazine.
Sure.
So
yeah.
I think that was actually the main impetus, like being thrown into this music world, like in a major metropolitan city, versus being this like hometown socialite. Like it was so much easier to come out of the closet as a producer in London.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So there was sort of, I don't know, like pressure from the community because it was such a small, tight-knit community in Estonia to like uphold a certain standard of like.
It's more like music is not. It's. I mean, okay, now there's more stuff happening, in a way, but at the same time, like there's not that much. Still, there's really, if you think about it, you don't most likely know much music coming from Estonia, with the exception of. Now there's this rapper who's really blown up. This guy Tommy Cash.
Okay.
And
I've heard of him.
He makes amazing videos, and he's a rapper. It's very different from what I do, but there's like singular people like that. But overall, like music is just kind of a forgotten like thing, and no one cares about your little project until you get recognition, like in the Western world or like outside of Estonia. Then everyone's like, oh, maybe you were onto something
so
all along, which happened to me too.
So people kind of have to move to get their hometown to get behind it.
I personally hate like the. Was it a dog?
Yeah, there's a dog next door.
Dog is like, stop talking.
He's been on the podcast a few times.
Oh yeah, crying.
Or barking.
That's so funny. No, definitely like not that anyone's hostile where I'm from, but it's just. Let's just say no one cares.
Sure.
And so the climate is just sort of unwelcoming in some ways, and there's so few venues that you can play shows for, let's say, half a year, but then you've most likely done it all. So it's definitely like the small city syndrome.
Right. So you have been living here for a few years now?
In LA?
Yeah.
Almost 4 years.
Okay, cool. And what are you up to? Are you working on a new album? Are you collaborating with people?
Yeah. Both, actually.
Cool.
The album is almost done.
Cool.
I mean, we were talking about how hard it is to make an album or decide to make one.
Totally. Yeah.
But I went through a bit of a creative drought when I first came to California. I mean, it was the drought here, so it was the drought around me and inside me as well. And it had to do with just kind of like feeling burned out and running out of money and touring too much and not having a life, I guess. Oh, so yeah, the album. There was a point when I thought I'll never make an album again, and I think it's because in underground music you can't really talk about stuff in these terms. But I felt like the last record I made was like a flop, and like not artistically, but I guess in terms of reception, and I just felt like it went nowhere, and I was kind of disillusioned. But it was also, it was a logical like end of an era for me. And then my personal life also, took some turns. Like I came to California from New York. I was applying for a green card. Like everything was kind of up in the air. And then I was feeling like jaded, but also like hopeful at the same time. Mostly hopeful about my green card stuff and like just hoping that there's a way for me to stay. And then that part worked out, and then I stayed. And literally took like a few years off from everything and anything to settle in the U.S. And like, people who are in music always jet set around and they make it sound very easy. But for me personally, like moving to the U.S. was a huge, tedious operation that sort of still is not over. I mean, there's still stuff that I have to deal with. So like that really became a predominant thing in my life for a while. And I was like not sure about how I want to approach the music thing, but I never stopped producing and like playing shows, but it was mainly collaborations and weird like one-off shows. And the collaborations really gave me life. And then one of those collaborations was an EP with my friend Chelsea, who is has okay, so she's no longer with us because she was one of the victims of the Oakland fire.
Oh, wow.
And so the thing that we were working on was supposed to be this really fun EP. It was not supposed to be this like swan song for her, which it will now end up being. And the fire was like almost a year and a half ago now. And everyone's like, are you still putting out the EP? Like, what's going on? But it's hard to explain like what happens after an event like that, or what happened in our friend circle. Even not like everything from the emotions to the logistics of dealing with someone's legacy, from conceptual level to file management, was extremely difficult. So it took a lot of time, but now we're like doing the final mixing.
Great.
And so that EP is going to come out first, and then hopefully my record next.
Great.
And I'm excited for both, but the EP is going to be very special because that's, there won't be any more music from her.
Right.
So
it has meaning beyond just the music itself. Yeah. So what's the, you said it was kind of a new chapter after you finished your last album. What was that, like a conceptual idea that sort of ended with that last record, or just coinciding with your personal life, it was time to, think about doing other things for a little bit?
Both.
Yeah.
But also it's like, I think I was maybe 25 then, which is kind of like a cusp of adulthood as well.
Right.
And I was kind of growing out of this like art girl, like art school chick persona. I mean, I still have that to a degree, but mentally, I guess, or intellectually speaking, like all the theory and whatever I was influenced by in grad school started to wear off, and you're kind of seeing like who you are after you're done with your like higher education, and like who you actually are as a person and as an artist.
Right.
Because when I started making music, I was, started grad school, and I was just so definitely like this like art school girl who's like reading this crazy stuff for the first time.
Yeah.
Easily influenced. Yeah.
Cool. And now you're doing, as a separate career, you're doing environmental activist work, or?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can, it's advocacy. I mean, we mainly do litigation and policy work. I don't do it. I do communications and outreach and like the advocacy part. But yeah, mainly litigation, and sort of fell into it, but not really, because a lot of the work revolves around holding big corporations and factory farms and agricultural producers like accountable for the pollution and the destruction that they're causing. And oftentimes, like, I do ask myself, like, how did I get here? But then thinking back even, of my education, it was very leftist or like lefty oriented, or let's even use the word Marxist. Like, I think I found a way to put those ideals into practice, because you can become an academic writer and write about, or maybe even a journalist or whatever, write about like what's happening in the society, and then you can be more of a doer, or like do the daily grind of the NGO work, which is what I fell into. And I like it because it definitely like is the opposite of being an individualistic artist.
Yeah.
Because you're part of an organization.
Absolutely.
And you don't get any individual credit for any of the victories that the movement has.
Sure, but also you probably couldn't have any of the victories without the organization there.
Yeah, it's like, it's beautiful. It is like a people power thing.
Yeah.
And, when you have a victory, like we actually had yesterday in Hawaii, we passed a law, and like it was a ban of this really dangerous pesticide that was... Basically, there was a federal ban underway for years under Obama, and then the second Trump got office, he met up with like the CEO of Dow Chemical and reversed the federal ban, and now the states have to ban this thing like one by one. Great. And so Hawaii was the first state to ban it, and like we were working on that, and like little stuff like that. Yeah. That you work on this bill for, let's say, 5 months, like I just did, and like it can die at any moment, and there's no guarantee, and then next moment, like the governor's signing the bill, and you're like, whoa, like we just passed a law, and that's like a really awesome
feeling.
That's
amazing. Yeah. So you sent me the 5 songs. Do you want to listen to the first one?
Yeah, and as a disclaimer, this is like mainly old stuff that definitely has influenced me.
Yeah,
but we can talk about
it
more.
But some of them were songs that I haven't heard in a while, and I was happy to revisit. So I think everybody will share in that too.
All day, all day.
Don't know why, I don't know how. Thought I loved you, but I'm not sure now. Seen you look at strangers too many times. The love you want is of a different kind. Remember when we felt the sun? A love like paradise, how hot it burned. Threat of distant thunder, the sky was red. When you walked, you always turn every head.
All day, all day.
Watch them all fall down.
All day, all day.
Domino dancing.
All day, all day.
Watch them all fall down.
All day, all day. Domino dancing.
Thought that when we fought, I was to blame. Now I know you play a different game. I've watched you dance with danger, still wanting more. Add another number to the score.
All day, all day.
Watch them all fall down.
All day, all day.
Domino dancing.
All day, all day.
Watch them all fall down.
All day, all day. Domino dancing.
When you look around, you wonder, do you play to win? Or are you just a bad loser?
All day, all day. All day, all day.
So that was Pet Shop Boys, Domino Dancing, single from the album Introspective,
Mm-hmm.
88. Great song.
That was the year when I was born. I
Oh,
didn't
really?
even know that. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
It is a great song.
Yeah.
I mean, do I have to tell the story?
Go ahead and tell the story.
There's really no specific story except that I was already talking about my father. So I think all in all, Pet Shop Boys was his favorite band, and
Mm-hmm.
I think involuntarily and voluntarily I've listened to about 700 million hours of Pet Shop Boys in my life. So, but this song is like kind of came back recently.
Yeah.
Because I introduced it to someone and they were so blown away by it, and
Uh-huh.
now we're just both listening to it and we're like, oh my god, this is so good. It's just like
Yeah.
has this really sentimental. I mean, if you watch the video, it's just these like extremely good looking people kind of in this like love triangle, but the guy is like clearly gay and the
Right.
woman's like a model. And it's like
Yeah.
this like Pet Shop Boys aesthetic, which I love.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it is like, I just love, like very upbeat, poppy, synth pop or whatever kind of pop songs where the lyrics are deceivingly sort of
Deadpan and ironic.
and sad, like
So sad.
about like a really chaotic, like romantic situation just in peril, and the metaphor is like falling dominoes, but yeah, I love that, and I love the little like Latin moments that they have in it. I guess they recorded in Miami with this producer. His name was Luis Martinet, who produced later like Ricky Martin and
Whoa, I didn't know.
Enrique
This is completely
Iglesias.
new information to me.
Yeah. So he was very much like the Latin pop guy.
Whoa.
And yeah, so there's that little guitar thing.
Yeah.
And then the horns at the end, like that's him.
That's so interesting because I thought maybe they were just doing it like in a gimmicky way.
No, they went to
But-
like the real guy. Yeah,
Apparently.
they went to the guy. Yeah.
And like this is so much better than Ricky Martin and
I know.
mean, it's like,
I know.
sorry, but wow, I had no idea.
Yeah.
Because there's this, then like La Isla Bonita, and these are like the
Mhm.
two like big like white people fake
Right.
Hispanic music
Right.
anthems. I feel to me
Right.
at least.
Totally.
So I don't know, but it still sounds fresh, and I'm always blown away by how bad of a singer Neil Tennant is.
I
But he's
know.
like such a good singer
I
at the
know.
same time.
I know.
It's like someone's uncle singing.
It's funny because I mean, like the good bad singing thing obviously is everywhere, but it's like these huge songs that were like really on the radio and that people were like, it was it was like I guess not this one, but some of the Pet Shop Boys had like at least a couple number one
Mm-hmm.
songs, and he's just singing like sounds like your dad or something.
Yeah.
I mean not your dad, but anyone's dad.
Anyone's dad, for that
Just
matter.
very not sexy, not very brooding or interesting, just kind of like a nerdy synth guy, which is what they were.
One thing that always struck me as interesting was that they became famous when they were already in their early 30s. I think Neil Tennant was like 32 or something
Right.
when Western Girls came out. And so before that, he was actually a music journalist. He was read about music for Melody Maker
Oh,
in
really?
the UK. And Crystal, I'm not sure what he was doing.
Yeah.
But he's like the coolest too, obviously. But it's just an interesting example of how you can reach like universal pop stardom after 30, which I feel like these days like does not happen anymore unless you
Sure.
go on like America's Got Talent, where
Sure.
you're like the old gem, like the
Mhm.
Susan Boyle or something.
Yeah.
But she's like way older than 30. Honestly.
I know. I when I was reading about them for this, like, I didn't realize quite how old they were, and it was kind of inspiring. It's like, well, I'm 26. Like, I haven't had my hit yet. Like, that means
It's coming in
there's a
7 years.
shot.
Yeah. You still have
There's
time.
still time. But yeah, it's a great song, and they just have this very specific like uncool but cool, nerdish, but completely like just as good as any other pop music being made at the time?
I think that maybe, I mean, I'm super partial, but I love watching their videos. They often collaborated with amazing photographers, and a lot of it is, you know, like 90s gay culture too, so it's kind of a time capsule.
Right.
And all that was before gay and LGBTQ issues were, you know, in the public focus like they are now.
Totally.
So kind of predecessors of that, but also having this incredible power to transcend homophobia into this universal pop stardom where even like middle-aged white men in Estonia like my dad would love their music. I think Pet Shop Boys actually was like how I learned about gay culture.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Because my father like explained it to me, and I don't remember how he explained it to me, but definitely like that was the entry point when I understood that not everyone has like a mommy and a daddy like my parents.
Yeah, yeah.
So, and they were obviously openly out for a long time, and like, I don't know, I will always respect and love them, even though I don't really like anything they put out in the last 10 years.
Yeah.
15 years.
They kind of lost it.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's sort of one of those legacies where because of how they started and because they were so kind of like unassuming and just very universally likable figures, like they weren't trying to do like a rebellious like I'm bad and I'm cool type of thing at all. So like yeah, they're making sort of crummy music now, but they're still like the same it's still the same persona.
Yeah.
And so it's not one of these things where, you know, you get old and you lose your edge and then you kind of are hateable. It's like, did they even really have that much of an edge to begin with?
That's
so
a
like
very
it's
good
okay.
point. I don't think so, yeah. One of the best things in my life, I guess, was when I first moved to the UK. I was just a really broke, you know, grad student from East Europe or whatever, and then someone dragged me to this bar in East London and walked in. I saw Neilton in there. He was just casually at the bar. I was like, this is a very good sign. Like, moved to the UK, see Neil Tennant within like a 2-week span.
That's awesome.
Perfect. And then I came to LA. I saw Angeline here immediately. I'm
like, she's everywhere.
Yeah, but I'm like, these are like, this is what I need.
Yeah, yeah.
You're always like, am I even supposed to be here? But then you see someone like that, you're like, okay.
Totally.
Perfect. So yeah, that's the story with Domino
Cool.
Dance.
Cool. That was Champs-Élysées theme by Bob Sinclair, French producer. Yellow Productions is his label. And yeah, I had never heard this song before. I don't think. Maybe I have in a room somewhere, but I've never YouTubed it.
I'm not surprised. I mean, it was definitely only big in Europe.
Okay.
But it was on TV, like, because obviously we had MTV, but we also had these German music channels called Viva and Viva too.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And, like, this was on Viva.
Okay, cool.
But for me, I guess, okay, you asked for influences, so I was like, what's an influence? And
Yeah.
this is, like, such a throwaway track. It's not, like, a big track by any means. But for me, it marked the moment when I got into house music, which was when I was, like, 13. I think this song came out in 2000 or 2001.
It was 2000, yeah.
Which I was 12 then. And then it was just kind of, it's so commercial. It almost does sound like children's music or like a movie soundtrack or something.
Right.
But for me, I don't know, I was just like, because I always like disco, but I couldn't like pin down like what this genre was. And then I obviously realized that it's house music, basically.
Right.
And my intro to house music was French house. So it was this and like Mojo, which had a huge single on European radio called Lady.
Okay.
And then Super Funk, and then obviously Daft Punk, which is like the most known like French house collective. And now like I rarely listen to French house because I found it to be so cheesy and like tacky. But at the time, like it was what kind of like changed my life. Yeah. Because I discovered dance music.
Yeah. But so this guy, I mean, he was sort of one of the pioneers of the French house sound.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was pretty big.
Yeah.
And I think he still makes music and DJs, but when I looked into it in the recent times, same as with Pet Shop Boys, like it's horrible. It's just this commercial clubhouse that just sounds like complete garbage.
Yeah.
And like compared to the newer stuff, this sounds like really intricate and quite beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, I was just kind of learning about I had heard something about like strings and the French touch before, but it was this guy, I guess, was the first to do like the sampled disco strings over the house.
Was Bob Sinclair?
Yeah.
Oh.
And that was his whole like French touch thing, and then a lot of other French people started doing it, and it became a distinctive thing about, you know, that region of house music. And you clearly hear it here because that one held note is like the first whole minute and a half of the song. It like doesn't even go anywhere. It's just like that over the kick drum. And
it's also the way it's mixed. It just has this like really radio-y sound, because you can listen to old Moody Man tracks that also have like a constant string, but they don't sound cheesy. Right. But this is just like, it's kind of borderline really tacky. Yeah. But I don't know, I just was really into it. And Daft Punk I also always loved. Yeah. And I don't know, it's just, I guess it's a good entry point when you're 12 years old.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
Could be worse.
Yeah. And also just, I don't know, I think seeing music videos on television and watching people perform music on television at that age, or at any age, but mostly at that age for me at least. So huge. Yeah, and it sticks with you like nothing else, you know? Yeah. It sticks with you so much more than just like hearing something on the radio or, you know, buying a CD or whatever it is. Like, it's a full mind, full body kind of like, wow, I'm here experiencing this. And like, even if you don't like it, it's hard to forget.
Well, you're always like, why is this on TV? And it's just a feeling of being like a hormonal little teenager, and then you come home from school and you just stare at music videos for 2 hours. It's like, I don't think anything in my life after that has been like as good of a feeling in terms of music consumption. Like, that was as good as it got for me
what you mean.
In my entire life.
Yeah.
because everything's also new and you've never heard it before.
Right.
And you don't understand like the difference between genres and like, because French house, it's like you find this one cheesy track on Viva channel, but then you start to dig deeper. You're like, there's this whole thing, house music, but then there's also French disco music.
Right.
Like I've always been really into Cerrone.
Okay.
And that's like, I don't know, I still like Supernature, all these like classic tracks are on par with like Georgia Moroder for me.
Sure. Yeah.
And that's like, I guess that's the beginning of that lineage.
Yeah.
It's very, you hear it too. And the Frenchy aspect of it is just this like really flirty, like cute, the little loops and everything. It's like, it's a sexy sound and it's like borderline stupid, but I still like it.
Do you know an artist, Arnold Turbost?
Mm-mm.
He's a French, he was like a French pop guy, and he worked with Etienne Daho a lot. And yeah, very much like takes the Italo disco thing into like the French synth pop. Really, really good.
All the music is so good. It's like you can only listen to it in small doses.
Yeah, of course.
You listen to like 5 tracks, you have like a pounding headache.
Yeah.
But
And then you just want to be like, okay, Georgia, shut up.
yeah. But that to me, also it's just this like parallel history of dance music in Europe, which obviously I feel like America should get most of the credit because this is like the birthplace of black music and black dance music. But some of the parallel stuff, even ABBA and all, whatever, like
Sure.
it's so good.
It is. I mean,
and it's just different. It's kind of like has this certain hollowness to it.
Yeah.
It's lacking like the blues, I guess, at the end of the day, but it's
Well,
so good.
Yeah. I mean, it's lacking something that both makes it like maybe less historically significant, but also just sort of a different listening experience that is really valuable sometimes, which is just like, I want to feel good. Like, I'll just put this on. I don't have to think about it, and then it's over, and that's it.
Yeah. But yeah, I chose this one because it's the beginning of my house exploration, but definitely not a significant track in the greater scheme of world history by any means.
Cool. That was Bag's Groove by Miles Davis, 1954. But then they put out the album 3 years later in 57. And it's a really cool moment in his career, I feel like, because he sort of had just stopped doing the bebop thing, but hadn't gone into the extremely, like, moody, brooding, like, you know, kind of blue era stuff yet. So it's kind of just before that happens, and it's amazing players, Sonny Rollins on sax, and Milt Jackson, vibraphone player. Really good. Really good.
Yeah, it's so good. And I'm no expert on jazz by any means. Any means. It's kind of come back again because I've noticed, like, you in LA, you always drive, obviously. So sometimes you just get tired of, like, your playlist or trying to figure out what to listen to. So I turned to the radio and started listening to the radio again, and, like, listened to a lot of hip-hop stations here in LA.
Oh, cool.
But then really got tired of those too, just like, because they have the same playlist, like, you hear the same song like 7 times an hour.
Right, the same, like, 10 songs.
Got really tired of that, and then my boyfriend got me into K-Jazz, like the jazz
88.1,
thing. Yeah. So now I only listen to K-Jazz.
Cool.
And they play a lot of Miles Davis too.
Yeah.
I don't think I've actually heard this one on K-Jazz yet in the last whatever months I've been on it, but kind of rediscovering that world. And this one was an interesting one. Also something I used to listen to when I was really, really young. So the story is that in the Soviet Union, which is, you know, where I was born in, officially, because it was the last 3 years of the USSR for Estonia when I was born. But what they used to do is put out these vinyl records of Western music, and it's a lot of people are really blown away by this fact because they think that there was not, you know, that the musical connection was, like, discouraged, or they didn't want people to hear Western music. But actually it's not the case, because they put out all these records on this Russian record label called Melodia, like Melody, and a lot of jazz records too. So this was one of the records that was at my house when I was growing up. And when I first got into vinyl, like, also as a teenager, and, you know, through my parents, I was just going through the record collection. That was the time when my father didn't care about vinyl anymore, because he had grown up with it, and he was switching to CDs and whatever, even MP3s already. But for me, it was like a whole new world just to go through his stuff from, I don't know where he accumulated all this stuff, but the Miles Davis LP was there, and a lot of, you know, Thelonious Monk and, like, Dizzy Gillespie and, like, all these jazz classics, all with, like, Russian lettering.
Oh, cool, yeah.
Like, issued by Russian labels. I would think they're just, like, bootlegs. I don't think anyone ever got the rights to any of this music, but they were, like, widely available.
Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I've heard that a lot of bootlegging in music comes from Russia.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they still don't care about copyright that much.
Right. That's funny.
And so, because they saw, you know, Western music as this, like, poison pill or, like, capitalist brainwash.
Right.
That was the official narrative, but then everything was still available.
Right.
Diana Ross, jazz, all that stuff. Right. And for me, too, I was just, it's weird to be, like, a 12-year-old listening to jazz. Because you don't understand, like, what this is or the history of the music, but you can tell that it's really good.
Yeah.
And so I feel like I've come full circle now, because I had this exploration period when I was really young or younger, and now I'm kind of slowly getting back into
That's cool. Do you feel it, like, entering your own musical practice at all, like this renewed interest in that kind of stuff, or is it just strictly, like, you know, I'm doing this, they're doing that kind of?
I wish it penetrated my work more, but no. And, like, one thing I'm really inept at is, like, improvisation, because I don't really play any instruments. Like, I can make a song, I know how to use samples or sing or whatever, like, I can do that, but I can't really play stuff. I mean, in a way, that's a form of improvisation, like just using whatever you have and know how to use and still make something out of that.
Yeah.
But just to go off on an instrument and
Yeah.
like go to places within a song, like no can do.
Right. Right. And so when you perform, it's all, you know exactly where it's gonna go and what you're gonna do.
Unfortunately, yeah, and I always wished it wasn't like that. But you know, it's kind of, it is what it is, and like
Sure.
I'm an electronic music person. Not that you can't, you know, improvise using that medium, but I have nothing but respect in like the vibraphone, all this shit. Like I think it's so it ages really well.
It does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The vibraphone is, I don't know. I feel like it's weirdly making a comeback in its own way, just as an instrument. Like I hear it.
Is it?
I don't
would
know.
hope so.
It's like I hear little vibraphone hooks in pop songs, and you know, I mean, jazz in general is sort of, at least in LA, has come back to an extent and has like gotten cool again. But yeah, I mean, this stuff, it's just, you can't argue with it. Like the playing is so, I mean, the playing obviously is amazing, but also like the musical ideas are just so emotive and so complex and but intuitive at the same time, and yeah, it's really special stuff. And this record, because of you know, where Miles Davis was in his career, like he had just quit heroin and he had just yeah and had just signed a new record contract and was sort of about to become the cultural figure that he will forever be known as, you know, just like this very intense, brooding, and very serious artist, rather than this guy who was just like a great bebop trumpet player. And so yeah, this recording is really cool because it's sort of right in between these two phases of who he was, and a little document of that turning point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one thing I also like about this vinyl is that if you look at the physical object, or even just online, you look up the cover image, it has this like huge lettering. It just says like Miles Davis, Backs Group. Like it's,
right.
it's I love like the typography of the record cover itself,
right.
and it's just kind of evocative for me.
Yeah.
And I just always thought it was so cool. It's like green background and like yellow and white lettering.
Yeah, it's very cool.
And I felt like I'm cooler by just owning this vinyl.
Yeah, totally. Is there jazz in Estonia? Like, is there anywhere to go see it? Are there people who play it?
But when I was there, no connection. I mean,
right.
It's like jazz is American music, so
right.
anything in Estonia, it's like mainly vocal oriented and kind of. I mean, we have like our standards you can call.
Well,
and there's
Maren
jazzy versions and stuff like that.
was a jazz singer, right?
Yes and no. Like she was, so Marian Good, like she was jazzy and her vocal manner is very jazzy. But when she was coming up, or when she was huge in the 60s and 70s, was mostly like easy listening / like estrada. Is that a word? Like
I think I know what you mean.
We call it like estrade, which is basically easy listening.
Yeah, lounge kind of stuff. Yeah.
But I feel like easy listening it's basically just like jazz light at the end of the day.
Right.
But like light.
Yeah, yeah. Totally.
So definitely a connection there, and like her and Ukugut, they got into funk and like the American R&B stuff, so that's, you know, directly related to jazz music. So yeah.
Cool.
But definitely Estonia is no haven for jazz musicians or jazz lovers. That's why I went to New York.
That was Stereolab, Cybel's Reverie, from the album Emperor Tomato Ketchup, 96. Their greatest success commercially, and I think critically, it's, known as one of the great sort of vaguely underground albums of all time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. It's just like my favorite band.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I need to explain any better than that.
Yeah. So you still listen to them all the time?
No, not at all.
Oh, okay.
It's like if I had to name, because I don't listen to bands per se.
Right.
But I definitely listen to them a lot in my life. And so we talked about French house. So one interesting, or actually completely boring fact about me is that I went to a French lycée.
Oh, okay.
And it was kind of like inundated with French culture, and had to study French every day for like 12 years. And my French still is not very good. But like all the stuff they try to get us into at school, like I sort of hate it. But then I found like this is not French, it's like British / French.
Right.
But this is like an example of something Frenchy that I really connect with. And
was it at that age that you sort of discovered them? And
this was like later.
Okay.
But maybe like around when I was 14. But just like when I write music, I think my lyrics are horrible, and I don't care that much about writing lyrics, because there's just kind of there to provide texture and some mood and whatever.
Yeah.
But then Stereolab, like all their vocals are really upfront and like super text heavy.
Yeah.
And I think they're just so good at like, not unlike Pet Shop Boys, like just putting so much content into this poppy sounding piece of music.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how they have the strings at the front, and then they don't come back till later in the song. Like Burt Bacharach and like that Brill Building stuff like that. That was very much a technique that he would use, and it's cool that they were just sort of an arty, whatever, post-rock band, but they were paying attention to like very traditional, like historical styles of songwriting and producing and arranging, and I think that is why they stood out, and why this album specifically stands out as like a really important moment where this sort of music that would only really be played on like college radio stations, they were actually doing something that was in much more like stylistically in the canon of like, traditional American like pop music songwriting,
Yeah, and there was this one big moment, that one reference, like when you watch High Fidelity, and the girl goes into the record store where John Cusack's working at, and he's listening to Stereolab, and she's like, "Is this the new Stereolab?" And he's like, "Yeah, it's the new Stereolab." It's like exchange at a record store.
Yeah,
but it's
totally.
High Fidelity was like kind of a big movie at the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just thought it was so cool that there's this like huge Stereolab moment.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Which is like a bonding experience for two people.
Definitely.
And yeah, I love the lyrics, like all the lyrics, but even this one specifically, like as a French learner, like the chorus like says like, what do you do when you've already done everything, drank everything, read everything, like this, like I don't know, like they were not that old when they made the song, but maybe in their 30s, like we're kind of realizing that you've already done a lot of things or been around the block, and then it goes into the like weird bridge part with the strings where they say like all the rocks, all the trees, like are telling stories.
Yeah, it's like celebrating.
It's very beautiful. Yeah,
celebrating
like magic
childhood
and everyday magic.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
about childhood essentially. So I just love that, and it's like it doesn't bother me that it's in French, because normally when like something so obviously French, like it annoys me. But in the case of this song, I almost forget that it's in French.
Right. Yeah.
So I have this like love and hate relationship with like everything Francophiliac.
That's interesting.
Because of my education.
Are there a lot of French speakers in Estonia, or is it?
Not at all.
Yeah.
It's just there's a few high schools in Tallinn, which is the
Yeah.
capital, which is where I'm from, that have like the French focus or whatever.
Mhm.
And my school was founded in the 20s and then shut down during the Soviet Union because it was deemed like too bourgeois.
Oh wow.
And then it was reopened in the 90s, and then I was like one of the first new like 90s generation that attended. So that's like my French story. And like a lot of people from that school went to like French speaking countries to do stuff, and I was always like, no, I hate that. So I went to like London or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool.
But yeah, this is just like, but that's also, it's like so European, and I love like sometimes like it's in French, sometimes it's in English, and they also have a very amazing musical evolution from their early stuff that's very indie rock to very complicated like krautrock inspired electronic motoric music or experimentation. So I love that.
Yeah, definitely. Really interesting arrangement on this song, and I love how the whole second half is just sort of a build thing, but not in a way that ever gets boring. It's just, it's there and it's repetitive, but the way they're playing and the way it's like strings with sort of this very crowdy drum beat is very unique arrangement idea. And yeah, it's a great song, great album, and
best
great
album name.
Yeah.
Emperor Tomato Ketchup. What?
Yeah, really good. That was Code 9 and the Space Ape Black Sun Partial Eclipse Mix. Early dubstep.
I don't know if it's dubstep.
Well, that's what they are known for, right? These guys.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would you call that track?
Just UK
Yeah.
music.
Yeah. So Code 9 is the owner of Hyperdub, which is a very important house music dubstep label. DJ Rashad, Burial,
Dean Blunt, Royal Halo.
Yeah. A lot of really music that has like changed my life. Yeah.
But his own music too is really good, and I think Code 9 might be one of the best DJs I've ever seen at a club, like when I lived in the UK, and even I think he's even played here a few times when I've loved his set. And he's just like, he's older. I mean, I don't know what that means these days, but he's like maybe in his late 40s. But just is one of these people who just knows everything about music and like has managed to create this community around the label Hyperdub.
Right.
But this specific track, once again, as an influence, like, it just marks the time when I moved to London and kind of became my own person and was really into UK dance music. And Code 9 has a connection to some of the people I studied with who were my professors in grad school.
Has a PhD in
he's
philosophy.
an academic.
Yeah.
And he's written like books about noise and bass music, basically.
Yeah. Cool. Very cool.
And I guess he does it all in a sense, but he studied together with my former professor in Warwick in the UK, and it's just kind of part of this like theory / practice scene. It marks a very specific time in my life, like the grad school days, basically, when this whole new world opened up to me, and I could see that it's possible to connect theory with practice, like he has done, because you don't have to know anything about him or his background to enjoy this track.
Totally.
But if you do, it's even better.
Totally. Yeah. And I feel like that's a very special thing about London. I mean, you know, like all
but
of
you
the
live
artists.
there too.
Well, but also just like becoming familiar with this world of music, like after living there. And, you know, like I think The Wire being there has something to do with that scene being, you know, very much a cultural movement, but also just an easily accessible like way for people to dance and just go to the club and have a good time, which is really special, I think.
Yeah, and one interesting fact about The Wire is also that they started out as a jazz magazine, as an improv magazine.
Yeah.
So the Miles Davis and the Code 9 are like more connected than we would like to think.
Totally.
But yeah, the energy in London like never failed me. Like it also made me very picky about parties and nightlife, and I hate being like the has-been or nostalgia person, but I definitely miss those dancey nights in London. And they're still there, but it's just the city's changing, and now the UK's political climate is changing, and it's not going to be as easy to access anymore.
Right. Yeah. So was that did you first start performing when you were in London?
Yeah, I played my first show in London and like completely terrified, and it was just weird because the people I was studying with and my professors were all there, and it was definitely felt like I was wondering like how did I go from being in a small city in Estonia to like kind of feeling the same feeling in London that everyone I know is at this stupid show and I have no idea what I'm doing. But that's where I started, in like East London is kind of the breeding ground for me, and like I have very little connection to it these days. The interesting thing about LA is that it sucks you in. It kind of erases everything that happened before that. And you're from here, so I don't know how that feels like. But LA for me, in many ways, has been like the final destination. So sometimes I literally need to listen to these pieces of music to remind myself that I've been at all these other places before.
Yeah.
Because even though I love like listening to my old favorite tracks, I actually hate reminiscing about the past. So
Sure. I get that.
It's kind of a mixed bag, but music is definitely the best entry point for me.
Yeah. And was that sort of your scene when you first started, producing music and putting out albums, like that London sort of arts world, dance music club world overlap? Was that those the people who were receiving your music and sort of getting you played and having people hear your...
I'd like to think that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got really lucky and was like connected with a lot of different people, and like the avant-garde and the wire scene, in a way it is connected from like the, how do you say, like the underground dance music scene, but not, it's
Right.
just like it's all the same thing at the end of the day, because the amount of people that listen to it, underground music, is always going to be a very small percentage of the population. So I think I just got lucky, because it's hard to come from like random place and find like where it's at, and I think I was able to find that. And then I left London to go play shows, and I was living in Portugal briefly, but I always think about those days like very fondly, even though as it was happening it was a complete nightmare, obviously. And life is so much better right now.
Yeah. Would you say that the theory as practice idea has always been a big factor in how you produce?
100%. And even to a fault, like even with this new record, I'm trying to kind of distance myself from that way of thinking. It's especially sad when you feel like you put so much of your thought or important stuff into something, and then it doesn't translate at all. But at the same time, like, it doesn't matter, because if people still listen to your stuff and find something else, like, that's the important part. But I definitely became convinced over the years that it really does not matter. Music is a very interesting thing that whoever listens to it, like, builds their own narrative. But it's definitely, I had fun, like, being so invested in all the critical theory and whatnot. But I also think you have to move on from those early influences. But that doesn't mean that you can't acknowledge that that was like a huge factor at some point. Or denounce that. So that's kind of where I'm at now. But this track I still love. I think it sounds so fresh and like ages really well.
Totally.
And it's not even that old. I think it's like from 2011 or something. 2010.
Yeah, 2011. And Space Ape is the MC, who's featured very little on this track, but they collaborated a lot together. And he was a very important voice in that, UK early dubstep sort of
He
sound.
passed.
He did, yeah.
So Space Ape was like my ex-boyfriend's master's dissertation supervisor's husband.
Oh, okay.
So it's a small world.
Yeah. It's all connected.
But yeah, the music's really good.
Yeah, cool. So you're working on this album now. It's a little less heavy on the theory, more just sort of...
Well, actually, the lyrics are better. So it's like, it makes no sense, honestly. You'll hear it.
Cool.
But I think there's just, good songs, and I've been working with a mutual friend of ours, Adam Gunther.
Yes, great
who's
producer.
a great producer, and that's new for me because I've never worked with a producer before. So if you guys don't like it, I'm just gonna blame Adam. It's not on me. Cool.
Well, thanks a lot for coming.
Thank you.
Excited to hear the album and whatever else you are up to.
Thank you so much. And the dog stopped crying too. So
the
it's a
dog is
happy
happy
ending.
now.
Okay.
Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Five. I'm your host, Ross Wallace Chape. You can follow me on Instagram at this_is_rot or on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/totalheat. Peace and love.